Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. I'm James McGowan.
I'm Jessica Faust.
And we are literary agents who have taken our popular blog to YouTube to discuss all things publishing. We haven't had a discussion like this before on the channel, I don't think. So we're going to talk a little bit. I think the person who phrased this to us, the question, called it Agenting 2.0, which is funny. So what happens, after the first book, whether it sells or doesn't sell? Where do we go from there?
I think this is a really important question because we always talk about, and even in the calls we have with clients when we're offering a presentation, we always sort of talk about what happens next, but this is the next.
Well, that's actually what I wanted to say, because I think that's the place to start. I think any agent who offers representation, this is a conversation you want to have on the call. So my first book doesn't sell. What do we do next?
Or it does sell. What's your role?
Right. Yeah. So where do we start? Do we start with the happiness when it sells or the negativity if it doesn't sell?
I don't know. Can we meld them both?
No, probably not. Okay.
Well, let's talk about when it sells then.
Okay. So you sold your book. After you celebrate, obviously, all eyes turn to what's next, right? Because we want to have that second book, that third book. You want to keep going and build a sustainable career. The place to start is having a conversation with your agent.
Yeah.
Every contract has a different sort of, parameters for next steps, whether it's an option clause, a competitive works clause. Those are things.
Whether it's a 2-book contract, 3-book, 1 book.
Right. So those are things that you need to discuss with your agent. And if it is a multi-book contract, with your editor. All of those people will weigh in onto what you write next.
Oh, they'll be happy to.
Yes. Yeah. We have lots of opinions and we like to tell people our opinions. So if you come to your agent or your editor asking, what should I write next? We will likely ask you, what have you got? What are you thinking about? And then sort of work to build the next step forward for your books.
I can't say enough how important it is to talk with your agent about what's next before you sit down and write. I've had a few instances where, I don't know at what stage an author's at. Always. So I know what their deadlines are and things like that, but I don't always know that you've already started your next book. And I've had more than one instance where an author went ahead and wrote that next book and I couldn't do anything with it. It wasn't a book that I felt I could sell. It wasn't the right next book. It wasn't the book the publisher wanted to be the next book. And that's an awful lot of time wasted.
Or there's just some elements of the book that don't work, but the book could work. So you've now written this entire book where if you had had the conversation, you might have gotten feedback that would help you have kicked that book to the next level in your first draft.
Yeah. I mean, you have an agent for a reason now, use them.
Exactly.
One of the things that when you sell that book that you should know at this stage and should have probably been part of your conversation with the agent when representation was offered is now what is the agent's job? And it changes completely. So, is this every agent works differently. So some agents still really feel it's important to be hands-on and still a very integral part of the editing process.
Right.
I don't personally. So I really feel like it's very important now for you to build a relationship with your editor similar to the one you have with me as your agent, because now your editor is your in-house advocate. They're the one who are pitching you to sales and marketing, and editing is subjective. So I'm hesitant to get overly involved in the editing process because the last thing I want to do is have you do all this work that the editor later wants you to undo because we have 2 different visions for the book.
That would suck.
It would totally suck. So, but your agent might feel differently. So the agent role is going to, I always feel like my role is to take a step back, to let the editor fill that spot. And I am now there fully as your business partner and support. But there are definitely things that I personally still want to be involved in. And this is a good thing for you to know on the offer call, or even at this point, say, now what do I do? Some authors will say to me, should I CC you on all my communications with the editor? Well, that is going to be personal from agent to agent. Do you want all of the communication? Does your agent just want some of them? Are there specific things? For me, it's covers. don't ever agree to a cover without talking to me first. Is just,
I'm usually CC'd on everything.
Yeah, and if you ask me, I would prefer to be CC'd on everything. My response is, I don't have to pay attention to it. I don't have to reply but it's good for me to be able to keep an eye on things. And sometimes I'll see something in communication that maybe the author's missing that I might jump in on.
Right. And I mean, particularly after the book is done, right? Like when you're revising, I'm a little less like, if you want to go back and forth with your editor, knock yourself out. But after the book is done, say we're attaching an illustrator, I want to know, but that's also how we track payments.
Marketing plans,
covers, if any inkling is ever dropped that you might not pick up on about a next book, about a potentially like carrying on with the sequel, things like that, you might not pick up on, but we will.
Yeah.
So us being CC'd and kept in the loop is just going to help us strategize for you, but also, we'll see those sort of cues of like, this is done, now we can send option material, or things like that. So yeah, I think it's always worth, if your agent's open to it, keeping them CC'd so that they can see all of that.
Yeah, but we are less hands-on in the actual manuscript phase at this point, and more hands-on on the business end of things, I guess would be the best way I could describe it. Business marketing, that kind of stuff.
Right. So now, say you are writing your next book for your publisher, what will you need?
What do I need? Or if the author has a 2-book deal and they're writing the next book, it's really the same process for me. But typically, if it's part of a series and, sometimes we've sold the idea with it, but if we haven't sold the idea, I do like to be involved in the conversation of what is the next idea going to be. But once you're writing and you're under deadline, I don't need updates. I only need an update if you need an extension, or you're struggling with something. I want to know that. But if you're writing under deadline, I'm not hearing from you. That makes sense to me. There's nothing for me to hear about at this point.
And once that first book is done, you can sort of take cues for what you need to do next from your contract and your editor. So you might need to write a proposal for this publisher, which might be a synopsis. Check your contract. You might just be able to clear the idea with your editor, talk to them, and then you can start working on a manuscript. You might not have a second book on your contract. You could have an option that requires only 3 chapters, that requires a full manuscript. Read your contract, check your contract, and then talk to your agent. And that will help you sort of keep your eyes on, what do I have to do next for my next book?
Right.
So it could be anything from just a synopsis and a couple of chapters to your full manuscript, to pitches for new ideas in general. Talk to your agent, because they will tell you what to do before you go and do whatever you want to do.
Exactly. So what happens, James, if that first book doesn't sell?
Well, anytime a book sells, I feel like most agents will have that contingency plan, right? We'll have the plan for what's next. And then if that doesn't happen, we'll have the plan for what's after that. So if your book doesn't sell, your next book doesn't sell to your publisher, a couple of different things can happen. You could try another book with that publisher. You could shop the book that didn't sell to that publisher. You could decide to put it on the shelf and just work on some other things. Like, there could be pivots at this point. Anything can happen. It's really individualized for each client, agent, and the circumstances that they're in. But yeah, those are a number of things that can happen. You could shop elsewhere, or which some people do with their option book that doesn't sell, or you can say, I really want to work with this person again. This is what I have. What do you think? And go with another book. But it depends. I can't give, there's no blanket answer.
No.
But the part of this question from that asker was, do you have to go through the whole submission phase again? And what I like to say is, it's every agent's goal to never have to put a client back on submission again, right? We want you to have that home publisher that publishes everything, and they just keep buying books from you, and they publish a book a year, maybe more. You are their author, right? Everybody wants that.
A big secret. Agents hate submitting as much as authors do.
Exactly. In picture books, we might want 2 or 3 of those publishers, right? But sometimes you have to. Sometimes it's time for that pivot, or sales don't quite work for that publisher and you have to go somewhere else, or you want a change, or new genre, anything. So submitting is never off the table completely.
No, it's and I say this when we discuss query letters, like, always be ready to do it again. Publishing is not a straight line trajectory. It is all over the place. And, you know, I can't think of a client who hasn't had the bumps in the roads and the ups and downs. It could be from book to book. It could just be one book. It could be a million different things. But, you know, the ideal agent is going to be one who's always going to be ready to take those next steps and be prepared and even a little omniscient about what might happen next.
Exactly. Yeah, just being prepared, like you said, having all of those sort of contingencies thought through.
Yep.
But I do want to say that these, like our answers in this discussion, is by no means like a one size fit all. Don't sort of take these ideas to your agent, like, why didn't we do this? It really does vary. And the information that we're trying to give is just, you know, that 101 basic information for authors who haven't had this experience yet.
And it varies from author to author.
Yeah.
How my experience with each of my clients and their careers is so completely different for each one. So, you know, as an author, don't be looking at your neighbor or your friend or anybody else and saying, but they're doing it that way, so that must be the right way to do it. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, there are so many variables, like who the agent is, who the editor is, who the publisher is, what the genre is, what the market is, what your sales were.
Exactly.
You know, a bajillion things play into every decision that we make as agents that make us have to rethink every single moment as if it's a new one.
Right. So we hope this video was helpful just in giving you a sense of what happens after that first book. Again, remember, it could be very different depending on your circumstances, but now you're a little more educated. Now you know what could happen, where you could go. We hope it was helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time.
Bye.